Well, here we go. Summer is almost over. Yes, I'm sorry to bring it up. I know that depresses a lot of you to think that the summer months are almost over. I'm sitting out here, though, still in the sunshine, and I'm getting ready for fall. I got to tell you, I don't mind the fall. But today, as I was doing my morning walk, I went by an area where there were a lot of children gathered out there getting ready to get onto the bus. And I know I could see in the faces of some of them, they were really excited. I mean, it's still the beginning of a new year. But there were others that had that look on their face like, ugh, here we go again. I'm not ready for this. And I guess sometimes I feel that way myself. But I was well, for those of you who watch these videos often, you know that sometimes I get ideas from other devotionals that I've been reading. And I was reading this particular devotional a couple months ago by an author by the name of Christine Kane. And she was reflecting on a time in her life when her mother used to tell her to quit slouching. I guess, she'd be sitting in her chair and she'd kind of be sitting like this. She knew, and you've seen that in kids, right? I'm sure they don't want to be there. They don't want to do it. I'll be honest, sometimes I see it in church. But anyway, her mom used to say, now stop slouching and sit up straight. And she said, I always hated that. I hated having to sit up straight, and I hated to have to get all dressed up, and I hated, just all of the things sometimes that mom would tell me to do. And I just wanted to relax. I just wanted to slouch. And she said, the funny thing about that was, as much as it bothered her that her mother used to say that, she found herself doing the same thing to her kids. Quit slouching. So as she talked about this in the devotional, she said, it's one thing to physically slouch. I mean, when you're physically slouching, you know that, you're kind of depressed. You're not looking forward to what's happening next. You just feel tired and worn out. But she made the connection between physical slouching and spiritual slouching. And she asked, how do you feel spiritually? Do you ever get that slouching feeling spiritually? She wrote this. She goes, it's easy, especially after a few years of our world changing so fastly, that we simply stop caring so much about our posture. We start to slouch, spiritually speaking, as well. To start moving slowly and reluctantly, to forget our mission, to fulfill our purpose as disciples, to forget that we are fighting the good fight of faith, to stop looking, to stop getting up, to stop moving forward, to start growing lazy, to not go to church, to read the Bible, to pray, to serve others. I read that and I thought to myself, I think a lot of us get that way sometimes. And it usually happens at times of change. When we move from the summer into the fall, some of us we're not looking forward to it, or the fall into the winter. We just get to that place where we physically just feel absolutely drained. And I think that can happen spiritually as well. And it's hard to get it back when it happens too. I mean, to sit up straight is sometimes just fake, isn't it? Well, as I was thinking about that, and I heard her say that, about fighting the good fight, we forget to fight the good fight. That image comes from the letter to Timothy, the second letter to Timothy. And some folks believe that this wasn't written by Paul, and others say it was written by Paul. But you know what? Even if it wasn't written by Paul, it was certainly written using the thought of Paul. And so imagining that this may have been written by Paul to Timothy, who was one of his younger proteges, so to speak, who he had been kind of mentoring along in his faith so that Timothy could kind of move forward. Towards the end of this second letter, there's a lot of encouragement. There's a lot of urging that Timothy would be able to embrace this kingdom of God and would take over and begin to move the church forward and would carry on fully in the ministry. But then Paul says this, as for me, I'm already being poured out as a libation, and the time of my departure has come. And then he says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. On the one hand, it kind of sounds like Paul is giving up. But on the other hand, what Paul is doing is he's recognizing that there is a time in our lives, not when we slouch and we forget our spirituality, but we absolutely embrace everything that God has done through us and by us and for us. And I think that that's where Paul is. He isn't in a period of spiritual slouch. He's in a period where he's really remembering all that God had done and all that God was continuing to do now that he was passing the baton on to somebody else. Now, I don't know where you are spiritually. I know for me, there are times when I feel really strong, and there are other times where I feel really weak. And there's times when I feel weak that I need that encouragement that Paul is giving Timothy to move forward. Even though he may be in another place in his life, he's ready to encourage that one that needs to move forward. So are you the encourager? Are you the one who needs encouraging? Take a moment maybe today and just ask God to help you remember all the good that God has brought you. And if you need a reminder, ask God to bring someone into your life or to allow someone to remind you of all the things, all the good that is happening within you and through you and by you. This is how we grow in our faith.